You know your POCs, we need to finalize that. The teams have to be now ready. And I think on Friday we would really take a look at the teams. You have got the entire spreadsheet on there. So work out your ideas, exchange your ideas, see who are the people who are going to be the best as your team members, and then we proceed on that. It will be one of the most important elements in the program. Next thing is, I think today's session, we are extremely pleased to have Mr. kIRAT PATEL with us. He is our alumnus, 1975 chemical.
No,
Mechanical. Oh.
working for
Working for chemical. And he has spent enormous times in startups, facing problems, turning them around. We saw last week also example of Salil Donde, but here we have got very different example of alumnus. I will not go beyond that. I will ask him to narrate his story. And I think with introduction by Raj, we start this session. Thank you.
Okay, so to kind of recap, we have gone from marketing, we went to sales, we did talk about fundraising with Salil Donde, and now we are moving on to customers. Customers are kind of what makes a company ultimately successful. And knowing how to handle a customer is probably the one thing that you're going to do all your life when you're running a company. You've got to know how to keep that customer with you from before the sale, when you start your whole relationship, to during the sales process, and then finally after the sales process. And the reason is that repeat customers is where there's profit comes. It's not in the first sale anymore. So what we're going to talk about today is how kIRAT faced a whole bunch of challenges, and in a company that the case study lasts 30 years. But before we do that, I want to kind of bring it all together between the selling process and the customer. I want to bring it all together. And the thing that I want you to really understand is that in selling, we talked about how you prepare for selling, all the different sales strategies, company strategies that you'll be doing, and then Salil Donde gave us the case study, right? The Bosni case study. And if you remember that particular case study, you had a situation where a long-term customer, a hospital, 15-year-old customer, buying products from a premium company, buying those heart machines and heart cuffs and all that, from a premium machine, premium vendor, is suddenly telling this premium vendor that I cannot afford to buy your high-priced premium products anymore. And there are other salespeople trying to sell cheaper products. Now, this is the most common problem all of you are going to see. And every company sees it. And every salesman sees it. Where some competitor comes into your account and offers a lower price, tries to undercut you in the business. This is the number one strategy that the competition will use. For example, right now, in industry after industry, people who have been doing business for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whether it is chemicals, whether it is plastics, whether it is fireworks, whether it is toothbrushes, pens, whatever, so many new traders coming along. They're going to China, buying in bulk a few containers of chemicals, of plastic, or paper, or pens, or whatever it is, and then flooding the market with low-cost, Chinese products. All of a sudden, you've had this customer for 20 years, boom, and the customer says, I cannot buy a product this month because I've got this new supplier who's giving it to me for 1/3 the price, or 30% less than what you paid. Cut the price, otherwise you won't buy a product. This is the number one challenge that every sales person is going to face. In your best accounts, you're going to find that that's a challenge. So the whole BOSI case is all about how you fight somebody coming into your account and trying to undercut you with price. Right? That's all that the competition had, those two other salespeople. They were going to undercut his product with price, right? So how do you undercut? So the thing to understand is that the selling process is not about the final pricing, the final buying and selling. It is not about that final buying and selling. And however, whenever the competition comes in with a lower price and the customer says, look, you've been overcharging me for 10 years. I'm done. I'm not going to pay any 30% more anymore because look, I've got an alternative to you. The salesperson panics. It's the most common reaction that the salesperson panics and then wants to just say, okay, I'll also give you 30% off. You know, but his cost structure may not support it. If he can promise 30% less, but the factory might say, I'm not going to send you product for this customer, so the salesman is going to lose the whole account. And he's going to lose the whole business by focusing on price. And that's exactly the BOSI situation, right? Because they walk in, there's a competition who's offering lower price, and all of a sudden, the customer says, I'm under price pressure, I cannot raise any philanthropic funds, patients can't afford it, I want to get, I want low prices. And you guys saw what happened. These guys were unprepared for handling the situation, and then you had a sales meeting that became a disaster. You guys agree? The meeting became a disaster. It became a disaster because essentially at the end of it, the buyer or the decision maker, Sergio, was very upset with Roberto and with Cora and with the salesperson saying, you guys are telling me to buy a more expensive solution, even though, I want just a lower price for these cuffs or whatever. So you can see that the whole sales meeting or sales call was absolute disaster, right? And essentially, this is something that you're going to face all the time. So how should situation have been handled in the right way? Sales call, right? So since we don't have much time, I'm just going to go and give you the answer straight away. Okay, so basically, every sales call needs to follow a 5-step process, and you need to remember this. Whenever you meet any customer, even if it's a repeat customer, first-time customer, you're not only selling to the department, who's going to buy the product, but to QA or whatever, whichever interaction happens in the sales process has to follow the 5-step process. And I've kind of given you the acronym for it. TRUST, trust. So the first element that has to be established in any sales interaction is to establish trust. That you can do business with me because I'm there for you. I'm looking out for your interest. The second one is respect, so which means that the customer respects your knowledge of the situation and respects that you will do the right thing for him. He respects your competency and everything else. Then the third one is because he respects your competency and all that, he is willing to share his problems, share his pain points, explain what problem he needs to solve with with the solution. So at that point, he's willing to start telling, and the salesperson has to start listening to what's going on, to the input that he's getting. He's asking the questions and getting into the understanding phase of the thing. Once you understand it, then you you propose a solution that's appropriate to that particular customer and his problem. Right? And then finally, the last T is to tie it all up, which is you have to remember to ask for the purchase order. You've got to see to it that, you know, the vendor qualification and everything is taken care of. You've got to see to it that the factory does the order entry properly, that the shipping of the product is done properly, and ultimately the customer is satisfied that the whole sales process is done correctly. So there is a 5-step process that needs to be followed in every sales call. And I want you to kind of remember this because this is really ultimately the most important thing. So if you were to follow this process in the BOSI case, let's talk about the very first element, trust. Was the trust established in that particular situation? Hmm?
The company there was the trust, but the guy who was negotiating at that time there was no trust.
Absolutely. The person who started talking had no relationship with Sergio, the CIO of the hospital, or the purchasing guy from the hospital. The trust was between Sergio and the sales guy who had been working there for 15 years, selling him products for 15 years. But the person who started answering the questions was this factory guy who had never seen Sergio. So there was no trust. Even though there had been a 15-year corporate relationship, there is no trust. So all of a sudden, Sergio knows that this guy doesn't understand my problem. I cannot trust him. He's going to come here, he's going to sell me something, run away, go away. He's not responsible for anything else, for an ongoing relationship. The reason you want to trust somebody before you do business with them is because you want them to see that you're ultimately happy with the transaction, that your needs are satisfied, right? So here, there's the factory guy trying to do everything, doing all the talking and proposing things, and that was never established. Respect. So you think there was any respect between Sergio, who's the purchasing guy at the factory, and the BOSI people? They didn't have any respect for him because they felt that he could not understand my problems, right?
He just wrote roughshod over.
Yeah, he just rolled roughshod over him. So there was no respect that I'm going to listen to this guy when he says, I'm going to give you a solution for, you know, patient care and all of that stuff. So there was no respect that whatever answer you give is going to be taken care of. Understanding. Did anybody listen? So nobody was listening to what this guy said. Because when you listen, what is the number one thing you have to do to show that you're listening and you're understanding? What do you do to communicate that you're understanding what the other person is saying while you're listening?
We acknowledge what the person is saying.
Exactly. And how would somebody from this side, how would the people from BOSI acknowledge, as he explained, that I'm understanding Sergio's problems? How would he acknowledge it? How does somebody acknowledge? This guy's talking for 10 minutes about, you know, the philanthropist not paying more money, the patients not being able to afford, it's a low cost, this is Brazil, it's very low, everybody's poor. What should be the response of the BOSI team? Well, how do they acknowledge that they are listening and feeling the pain?
Sharing their same experiences.
Exactly. They should say, yes, we know that other hospitals are also having the same problem, and we know that in Brazil, you know, there's right now a recession going on, or whatever, people are feeling poor, and things like that. You know, you have to empathize, which means you've got to acknowledge, you've got to, and now, what does that empathy and acknowledgement result in? Results in, okay, we are both on the same team trying to solve the problem. Right? If you empathize and you agree that these are the problems that the hospital has to solve, and as a vendor, then you suddenly become the person who's sitting right next to the person with the problem, and you're going to both solve the problem together. So all of a sudden, moving to, and did they do this understanding? Did he show understanding at all? Did he even acknowledge that there was a problem? He just straight away said, why don't you go ahead and start providing a patient, remote patient solution and all that stuff, without even acknowledging that really, I agree the price per patient is too high. I agree, money is tight. Maybe there is, all of that is true. How do we work together to solve the problem? Right? So that whole thing should have been turned around. And if they turned it around, how do you turn it around? You turn it around because you cannot drop the price instantaneously, right? You can say, but once you think that the OC team did not know that they were walking into a sales situation which was cost sensitive. They were aware that they were walking into a, so did you see any preparation with out-of-the-box solutions, with a strategy for handling a customer where they're facing price competition? So there was no brainstorming between the team. In fact, they were not aligned at all. Because one guy was trying to do what the factory wants to do, which is keep the ASPs up. Cora, the VP of sales, was just trying to figure out how are we going to handle the situation, and the sales rep was completely left, without no control of the meeting. So you actually had a situation where the sales rep had lost control of the meeting, right? He knows what's going on in the account, but he's not controlling the flow of the back and forth, right? The whole interaction is going outside. So the solution, there could have been 10 other solutions that could have been done. They could have walked in and said, look, I'm going to work and help you get some philanthropists that I'm aware of introduced. Or I'm going to go ahead and give you a roadmap where in 6 months I'll have a low-cost product line also coming in. Or once you start preparing pre-meeting, you can offer solutions. Because you know what you're walking into. So you can prepare 5 different alternatives and say, how about this, how about this, how about this, how about this? Or, I'm going to give you total average lower cost of treatment because I'm giving you this remote sensing solution. Right? So there are many ways to convince if the customer is brought into a listening mode, where he's willing to listen to you, and finally the type. So you can see that in the Bossy case, which is a very common situation, and it's going to happen to all of you. It's probably happened to me hundreds of times. I think 1 out of every 2 sales meetings is all about price, how the competition is undercutting us, and we are not doing anything, and why are you charging so much money, and so on. 1 out of every 2 sales calls, and hundreds, thousands of meetings, it's all about handling this kind of a problem. And all of these problems you have to handle using this 5-step process. First, establish trust, get the respect, understand the situation, show empathy, then propose 2 or 3 solutions, and then figure out, how to, get the business rolling. Okay. So, moving on. So, once all the sales is done, ultimately the goal is to build a successful company. And a successful, great company has got 3 key elements. So the 3 key elements are provider of choice. I think by now it should be obvious that you're going to provide products that customers like. They are going to refer, just like Sergio is actually referring all the other hospitals to these guys. So you've got to create raving fans. One upset customer can do so much damage, while one satisfied customer can do so much benefit. So companies that are successful have raving fans, and then to be an employer of choice, and that we're going to do more of that at some point. But, you know, the management cannot be there when every salesperson is talking to the customer, or customer call person is talking to the customer support person. So they need to be people who also care about customers. They should have the right attitude. And finally, you want to be the investor of choice. Somebody that, you know, a company that makes so much money that investors are happy to keep investing in your company. So today, we are going to do this case study on DACL, and it's really got a whole set of life lessons about how successful companies are built. And you'll see that building a company is messy business. There's technology issues, product issues, conflicts, all kinds of things, macroeconomic changes, microeconomic changes, and 101 things come together in creating real companies and building them into successful ones. kIRAT has had this privilege of working with this company for 30 years, and you know, he's going to share that entire 30-year journey and then kind of get us to the point where, you know, we can see the lessons and of how these great companies are built. Okay? So, kIRAT, yours.
Do I need the mic? Can you hear me?
No, because we are recording.
Can you hear me? Okay, my name is kIRAT. I graduated from IIT BTech 1975 as a mechanical engineer. Went, as usual, to do an MBA at one of the top colleges here. Then graduated and got campus recruited into a management consultancy firm. At that time, there was no McKinsey and stuff like that. The equivalent was a company called Air Ferguson and Company. Spent 3 years doing management consultancy, got bored, and then jumped out. And in 1980, I joined this company called Alkyl Amines Chemicals. It was just a chance meeting with my boss. He was my boss for the last 35 years now. He was a young man, chemical engineer from university. Spent a couple of years in the US doing his MTech and MBA, and came back to the country and decided that he wanted to start something. He had an idea. He had spent 6 months working with another chemical consultancy and his family business, working on what to launch. And in those days, the mantra at that time was import substituted. Because the country in the 70s wanted to build its industry. So anything that we were importing, and if you made, the government supported you. With money, with duty protection, with markets if you had to get into. There was a lot of support for, and especially for young technocrats. Today it's a lot more competitive. In those days there was a lot of protection. But it was a lot more difficult because there was no infrastructure. Nobody to guide you. You did learn by jumping into the swing. So he set up this company called Alkyl Amines to make aliphatic amines. It's how many of you are chemists here? Or chemical engineers? One. Oh, quite a few. Okay. So I may slip into jargon related to chemical industry and stuff like that. And those of you who stop me if I'm going to off track into this. So he started this company in 1979. In those days, we needed something called a license. And he got a license to manufacture amphetamines. You had to go to the government in Delhi and say, I want to make this. And they had a division called the Directorate General of Trade and Trade Development. Which was, they used to decide what the country needed, how many tons of this and how many cars and how many this and that. How they decided, God alone knows. And then they used to issue, okay, you can make 1,000 tons of this. And if you even crossed it by 1 ton, the government would be after you. It was a strange place at that time. Anyway, he got a license because he was a technocrat, and those days they were encouraging. The other two people, one was a big company, and the other was an MNC who wanted the same license. The market for these Ayurvedic means was very small and just developing. Anyway, that's the story. It's now been 34 years since we started. We started with sales of less than 1 crore in the very first year in 1982 when we set up the plant. And now we are a market cap of about 800 crores heading towards 1,000 crores. And we've struggled along the way. But today's story is not about this company. It's about another company which started around the same time with the same idea, but in a slightly different field called ethylene amines. We have the Ayurvedic amines, we have the ethylene amines, two different types of amines. And that started also around 19. I'm going backwards. Thanks. So I'm going to talk to you about diamines and chemicals. Don't worry too much about why it's called diamines and yours. It's not a matter of chemistry and stuff like that. It's important if you're in the business, of course. Always know your product. Okay, this is the company which started around the same time. It started with indigenous technology, with National Chemical Laboratories doing the first bench scale testing. And from 75 to 1982, 7 years it took them to build a commercial plant. One question, why didn't the biotechnology be faster? Any idea why they didn't do it? Sorry? You're still raising my Syntex, the parent company.
Government was paying them.
Bharat Vijay was a very, very successful company. They're the ones who are now the Syntex tanks you see. That's a division of Bharat Vijay. At that time, they were one of the big successful textile companies. Nobody was selling the technology. There were big guns who were in the business. Dow, BASF, Union Carbide, Akzo, Tosho of Japan. They were all in the business. Nobody wanted to sell the technology. And that was a problem with most companies in India. They were unwilling to let go of technology because you would become a competitor. So they had to invent. The same thing happened with the Chinese also. When they started looking for technology and trying to get to build products and manufacturing capacities. So anyway, they struggled and formed it. The first full year of operation was 1982-83, coincidentally exactly the same as Alcalá mines, 1982-83. First year turnover, they had accumulated loss of 1 crore because they had a capacity of 2,000 tons, they were sold only 150 tons. Nobody would accept that product into the market because you are buying for years a BASF or a Dow or a Union Carbide product. At that time, Union Carbide was the market leader. And why would you switch and take a risk with somebody who's just come up in Baroda and he's wanting to set up a plant and technology is Indian and stuff like that. So you struggle. They struggle, we struggle. But over a period of time, what happened is, in those days, you had customs duties. So you got protection. The minimum custom duty in those days was 30%. That means BASF, if you wanted to sell in India, you had a markup of almost 30% safety margin before for you to sell. Unfortunately for you, the raw materials were also 30% more expensive. So it didn't work out.